Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you so much for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, I am so happy to have as our guest, Mr. Robert Allen. Robert is a mental health activist, growth coach, and author with multiple advanced degrees in lots of different areas, including business, counseling, education, divinity, healthcare, and leadership. With over 20 years of experience in the public and private sector, Robert has served in many different capacities. And today we're going to be focusing on his book, Self-Care. Let's start the conversation. And you can find out more at R. Wallen, that's WALLEN, books.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, Robert.
Thank you for having me, Ellen.
Now, let's go back in time and let's talk about little Robert, the little boy. What was it like for you growing up, if you can go back and be your child self?
All righty. Well, I grew up in the inner city of Detroit, Michigan. And what I recall was a neighborhood, and my cousins would come over on the weekends, and the adults will be playing games. The kids will be outside playing tag. And that's what I remember, community and family.
So that sounds like a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah, it was a ball of fun. So, yeah.
And from there, what made you progress to, be very eclectic in terms of your interests?
Well, it was more or less so. When I initially went to school, I wanted to be a U.S. Marshal. So I saw a movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was a U.S. Marshal. I said, I want to do that. Then I saw the movie with Eddie Murphy, Boomerang, and I said, I want to be in business and marketing because that looks cool. So various tracks in life took me different places. So I knew I wanted to give back. So education was a big part. So I had a split degree in education, human services, with a minor in business and a focus on criminal justice.
Wow, that's a widespread of things. It's not focused, but it's like kind of a broad base of understanding. But I imagine that you noticed no matter which of those paths you were in, there were some things that were the same in terms of human interaction.
Absolutely. I remember some of my favorite classes in college. My undergrad was sociology. I love people, the study of people and their behaviors and how they interacted with each other. So that was always fascinating to me. And in every, position I've held, you deal with people. And so I love people, and it was amazing.
Well, of course, our topic here on Herbally Yours, we're always talking about health and wellness. So, that's one of the things that you talk about being is a mental health activist. What is a mental health activist?
Well, I have my master's degree in counseling, and in the state of Nevada, went through licensing. And what I've seen more, with doing couples counseling, individual counseling, group or family counseling, what I've seen is a lot of people stressed out, frustrated, in a lack of communication. And so for me, what was important was getting down to the root cause of why people interact the way they do. Why are people frustrated? Why are people stressed? And getting down to a root cause of some of those things. So being an activist is saying more or less so, hey, it's more than just a diagnosis. what's going on? How is your work-life balance? What can we really focus on that can be contributing factors?
Well, since you are a licensed mental health counselor, even though it's in the state of Nevada, I know something went on during this period of time with COVID where people were able to do telephone sessions like from anywhere all over the country.
Oh, absolutely. So, telehealth has been huge. I think, with COVID-19, what the world had to do was pivot. We couldn't do things the way that we used to. So telehealth in the mental health field became very big. And not only in the mental health field, because I'm also a growth coach, which is in alignment with the mental health field. And that's why, again, I say activist, because I think I do a lot of good work also as a growth coach.
So what is a growth coach?
So,
I don't think I've ever heard that word. So I love learning new things.
So a growth coach is someone that will work with you. So whether it be work-life balance, whether it be, finding out things why you're stressed or frustrated, and helping you build goals. So a growth coach can go from, business to personal to, sometimes spiritual, and work with a person to meet their goals. From a license standpoint, they will help you. Licensed professionals will help you with mental illness and mental challenges that are diagnosable. So with mental health having such a stigma, you will see a lot of people, or what I've seen is a lot of people who would gravitate more towards a growth coach because they just have some life balance things that they really need to address, and they feel more comfortable because they don't feel like they're labeled.
That's really interesting. I've never heard of that before. So it might be, they're not, let's say, they're not schizophrenic and they don't actually have a mental health problem. They're not maybe an addict, or maybe they are and they don't want to talk about that. So you would use the term growth coach. I never heard that. That's really interesting.
So we have a team, our team at New Dimensions. We are all certified growth coaches, and it's training that you go through. And, again, so if you can think about a company who, they have employees and it's work-life balance issues, high stress job, they may not need a mental health professional, but you can get a growth coach to come in, work with a group, help elevate them in different aspects. So you can meet with them as a group, you can meet with them individually, and you set goals and things like that. And a growth coach helps you get back to a state or a point where you're real balanced and you're more productive.
Well, that's excellent. And I want to tell our guests that you are listening to Herbally Yours right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, and my guest today is Robert Allen. He's a mental health activist, and he's sharing with us a growth coach. And you can find out more at New Dimensions Consulting Services, and also self-care. Let's start the conversation. And that's the name of your book, Self-Care. Let's start the conversation. So let's start a conversation about self-care.
Let's start it. Come on, Ellen.
What does this mean, Self-Care 101?
So self-care, I take it back to when you asked me how was life growing up as a kid, and I was able to share with you the lovely parts of me growing up with my family and having that sense of community. Also growing up, I was told that, you have to work hard. I was, show how to work hard, but I was never shown how to shut off. I was raised to be competitive. I was raised to always do my best. And all of those are absolutely good attributes. But no one told me or showed me or explained to me, how do you shut off? How do you decompress? How do you take care of yourself? We were always taught and showed how to take care of others, but wasn't taught how to take care of ourselves.
That's interesting, and it's certainly true, especially, was your father a strong influence when you were growing up?
Actually, my father died when I was about 8. And so I did not have the strong father figure. However, my oldest brother, he stepped in, and I had 3 uncles who stepped in and helped as much as they could. But I didn't have a single strong male father figure in my life.
And that often, detrimentally, I think, affects young men in particular when they're growing up. But it sounds like you went ahead and worked around it. And I know in Self-Care 101, and in your book, Self-Care, Let's Start the Conversation, you also talk about men in particular, like Self-Care Guide for Men.
Absolutely. And so self-care, I redefine the term. When you hear self-care, you just think of a vacation. Many people think of a bubble bath. In writing a book and doing training, so I did a lot of trainings before I wrote the book. And the trainings is what's prompted me to even write the book, because people, after I did trainings, were asking, well, do you have a book? I said, no, I have a very good PowerPoint. But a lot of people thought that self-care was selfish. A lot of people didn't understand the true concepts of self-care. So I redefine self-care in the book, and it means whatever fills your space and whatever fills your cup in your most needful space. So that means self-care is progressive. What you needed for self-care in your 20s would be quite different than what you would need in your 30s or 40s, or just different aspects of your life or where you are. Kids change how you would need self-care for yourself. Marriage would change how you would need self-care for yourself. Taking care of an elderly parent or grandkids all changes the way that we need self-care.
Well, that's true. So it's individualized. But I think a lot of people, especially when they're involved in taking care of so many others, the last thing they're thinking about is, what can they do for themselves?
Exactly. And that's why this book and the topic itself is so important. So in the first chapter of the book, I talk about stress. And so based off the CDC, there's over 110 million stress-related ailment deaths that occur a year. 110 million. That's directly linked to stress. So we're talking about heart attacks and strokes and all of these different ailments that leads to death. Most of it is due to stress. And so when you talk about self-care isn't something that sounds like a good idea or we probably should do. It's something that's absolutely necessary for us.
And so few people really recognize that, because especially when they're under so much stress, that's like sort of the last time that you can take that step back and say, wow, what can I do for me?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll take me, for example. I operate somewhat better in chaos. In stress, that's when I shine. When I shine the brightest, I feel comfortable in that space, but also it's very dangerous. So when people operate with a high level of stress, then it becomes unknowing to them that they're even in a stressful environment, but because it becomes something that's familiar and common.
I would say that's true for me too, because people always say that to me, in this just incredibly crazy whatever's going on. They say, how do you stay so calm? And I think I just turn everything off in terms of being reactive.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. So I so understand what you're saying there. Yet is kind of dangerous, because when we operate in such a high level of stress, even in holding our composure and being calm, what we risk is not knowing when we need to take care of ourselves. And so I'll give you an example. When I was in college getting my master's in counseling, one of the things that the director of the counseling program did, she got all of the students together and said, your very first assignment is to go out and get a therapist. And I was just like, well, we're here to be therapists. That doesn't make sense. And so she asked me to come down, and she was just like, oh, so you have something to say. I said, well, I just don't understand the concept of why we need to have therapists when we're going to be a therapist. So she sat me at the front of the class and she started handing me books. And as she handed me books, she didn't give me too many instructions. She said, just hold these books for me. So she was addressing the class, talking to the class, and kept handing me books. Long story short, I started shaking after a while. The books fell. And she turned to me and said, there's 30 other people in this class. When were you going to ask for help?
Oh, for someone else to at least get one of the books, right?
Or when were you going to say, stop, that's enough?
Right.
But because, we're used to taking on more and more and more, I never would have said it was enough. But it got me to realize that everyone has a point, a breaking point. Everyone has a stress point or a stress limit point. And so I felt a little goofy sitting at the front of the class with all the books on the floor. But that was a powerful tool that she used to help me to understand that, you do need to take breaks and you do need to have the power of no.
Yeah, that was a great way to point it out. That reminds me of a lesson a teacher did with us where they handed everybody in the class Jell-O of different colors, Jell-O.
Yeah.
And so it was like green and red and orange, all different colors. And she had us all stare at that Jell-O and think about what it would taste like. And then when we tasted it, it was just plain gelatin, which is, if anyone's right, exactly. But it was really interesting about that change in perception. Because you actually had your mind completely wrapped around, orange or green or, and it wasn't that. And it was just a great teaching tool. So it sounds like your teacher there had a physical teaching tool that really caused self-realization and awakening.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry you had to go through eating the tasteless Jell-O.
Oh, it's good for you anyway, but thank goodness. But that's a very interesting thing that she did. So how did that relate to then you actually wound up getting your own therapist for the course?
Well, it was part of the homework assignment, and I was the only one sitting at the front of the class with the books on the floor. I got one. And what I began to realize were there were so many things that I had that, the loss of my father. When I was younger, I had 13 family members die in a very short period of time, within 5 years. And so loss was a common theme for me. And I didn't know that it affected me in the ways that it did. For instance, when my dad had passed away, I didn't mourn my dad till I was in middle school. I went into a room. I liked a little girl, and I went into a room to ask my dad for some advice. And that's when it hit me that he wasn't there.
Yeah.
And so having that therapist helped me unpack a lot of things that I didn't know that still affected me. Later on, I understood it to be compact grief, where we can compartmentalize and continue to just add more and more and more. And then we put it off in a little box, compartmentalize it and forget that it's there until something rubs us and it comes back to the surface.
Well, that's a great example. And you have a lot of experience in many different areas, including divinity and law enforcement and military.
Yes, ma'am.
What kind of experience do you have in those areas?
Okay, so for law enforcement, I was actually the chaplain over the Ann Arbor Police Department in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and so I worked with the lieutenant in the chief of police to create a chaplain's department within the Ann Arbor Police Department. For the military, I served as a sergeant in the United States Army, and with regards to divinity, I serve also as and I still am, a board certified chaplain. So I've been a manager of spiritual care for several health systems, and a director and a chief as well for chaplain services.
And then if you're working with an individual as a growth coach and with this very diverse background and in-depth training that you have in so many areas, I imagine with some individuals, you can bring in something that might be considered divinity, and with others, they may not be as open to that.
Absolutely. I go where the client or the patient wants to go. I never push a religion, never push anything. Whenever you're with someone, you are to come alongside them where they are and to really understand their story and why they feel the way they feel and why they believe some of the things that they believe outside of a religion. But as you said, what childhood factors help shape or motivate the way you view things and see things?
Yeah, that's a really great thing to bring out. Now, since you have a little focus on men, what would be different about self-care for men than it might be for women?
So men, and again, I can speak from my experience, men has been considered to be the person that, provides for the family, who goes out and work. Not that women don't work. I'm not saying that. But, culturally, depending on where you are from culturally as well, me being an African-American male is absolutely prevalent that, you're the one that's supposed to go out, get the job, provide for the family. And so for men, I think that if you're not working and always doing something and staying active, is looked down upon. When I did a poll before writing the book, and I asked just men that I knew about self-care, they was, what?
Right.
What is that?
What does
and I'm
that
like,
mean? Right.
When was the last time that you were able? So I talk about 4 R's in the book, which is the 4 pillars: retreat, reflect, refresh, and then restore. And I asked, I just asked someone last week, I said, what do you do to get away for you? And we end up having like a 30-minute conversation. It was just like, I've never done that. What are you talking about? So I think women are more apt to say, I need a break and get away. We can get into how they practice self-care and get into those things. But I think women are more apt to say, I need a break. I need to get away. I'm going on a girls' trip, or I'm going to pamper myself, to get my nails and things done. So men, we typically don't do that.
Right. And so what are some of the physical and mental health benefits of self-care? Because you do lay out in your book ways people can do self-care. So why would you bother?
So going back to the 4 R's, the first R is to retreat. And that simply means to get away from everything that is a distraction from you. The second thing is, or the second R is to reflect. This is so important. I don't think that, as a people that we reflect enough. We make decisions in busy instances and high emotions and things like that. But to actually get away, which is to retreat, and to reflect, what is going good in my life? What things needs to be adjusted? And being able to think about those things from a settled place, in a place of calm. The next is to refresh. What fills your cup? What are things that just bring you joy, bring you happiness, and elevate you? What people helps pour into you versus drain you? And then the last one is to restore. You putting all those things together and coming with a fresh mind on how you're going to move towards whatever goal that you have. So the 4 R's is significant because it helps people reset, decompress, rejuvenate, and move forward.
That's excellent information. And I do want to remind you that our guest is Robert Allen. And what would be the best way for someone to find you if they were interested in maybe having a private consult or getting a copy of your book?
So if you want to get a copy of the book, you'll go to that's 3 W's.rwallenbooks.com. If you go there, you'll see Self-Care, Let's Start the Conversation, and other products and merchandise. We have shirts that say "Do Not Disturb, Self-Care Mode." And if you're interested in training or a consultation, you can just click the training button right at the top of the page on the self-care website, and it'll redirect you to our new Dimensions page, and you can fill out all the information that you need, and one of our professionals will get with you to set up a consultation.
And you do things there at New Dimensions, such as leadership, things that are business oriented besides just personal.
Absolutely. And so we do retreats, we do growth coaching, we do trainings on self-care, along with other leadership and things like that. So we do a gambit of things, but we have our own niche where we let other companies do what they do best, and we focus on what we do best.
Now, with our current state of affairs here, have you found that burnout was more prevalent because of so many people, let's say, working from home and the whole, COVID situation?
Well, burnout was happening before COVID. COVID just changed the way that people were burnt out. So let me quantify that a little bit. So before COVID, people were working hard and it's very competitive when you work. You got to work better than the person next to you if you want the new position. So burnout was happening before COVID. COVID shifted, and what we saw was people were more stressed because of uncertainty. When fear of, am I going to catch COVID? Am I going to die? Or my family member's going to die? What does the world look like? Can I go outside? So stress looked differently. So before COVID, a lot of working, a lot of burnout, no work-life balance. COVID, stress, fear, and that leads to a different form of burnout.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being our guest today, Mr. Robert Allen, and hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on, Ellen. I enjoyed myself on today.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning into Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us again next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.